Trump said Iran is negotiating on fumes. Iran is still sitting on 440 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%. A Google engineer just made $1.2 million betting on his employer's own data on a crypto platform. And London hit 95 degrees Fahrenheit this week, in May. Let's get into all of it. At Wednesday's cabinet meeting, Trump said Iran is negotiating on fumes and insisted that midterm elections will not affect his war strategy. That second part is the tell. When a president volunteers that politics aren't driving his decisions, politics are driving his decisions. Here is where the Iran deal actually stands as of today. Iran holds approximately 440 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%. Weapons grade is 90%. 440 kilograms at 60% is not a casual problem. It is, by most non-proliferation expert calculations, enough feedstock to produce multiple nuclear weapons, if further enriched. Trump has said repeatedly that the uranium must either be transferred to the United States or destroyed in place on Iranian soil. On Wednesday, he added a new constraint. He would not be comfortable with Russia or China taking custody of it. Russia had publicly offered to accept the stockpile. China had signaled openness. Trump said no to both. That leaves two options. Iran ships 440 kilograms of highly enriched uranium to the United States, a logistical and political event of staggering complexity, requiring Iranian domestic consent from a government whose entire national identity is built around its nuclear program as a symbol of sovereignty, or it gets destroyed on Iranian soil, which requires foreign inspectors, a chain of custody procedure, and verifiable evidence that the entire stockpile was neutralized. In a country that has spent 30 years playing cat and mouse with international inspectors. Neither of these is simple. Neither of these has been agreed to. The internal split inside the administration is now public. Axios has previously reported that Vice President Vance and Special Envoy Witkoff believe diplomacy is viable and the U.S. should be ready to compromise. Rubio and National Security Advisor Waltz are highly skeptical and support a maximalist approach. PBS NewsHour reported Wednesday that the emerging deal has already exposed Trump to fierce criticism from within his own party. Republicans who say the framework too closely resembles the Obama-era JCPOA, the agreement Trump spent his first term calling the worst deal in history, and then ceremonially destroyed. That comparison is worth sitting with for a moment. The 2015 JCPOA required Iran to reduce its uranium stockpile by 98%, cap enrichment at 3.67%, redesign a plutonium reactor, and allow IAEA inspections at all declared facilities. It was verified and functional until Trump unilaterally withdrew in 2018. Since then, Iran's enrichment program has accelerated to the point where it now holds weapons-ready precursor material at levels that would have been unimaginable under the deal Trump killed. The administration launched a war to undo the consequences of killing a deal and is now negotiating a settlement that, according to multiple regional officials, may end up looking structurally similar to the deal that was killed, except with Iran's stockpile 8 years more advanced. And through all of this, the fighting has not stopped. On May 26th, while American and Iranian envoys were negotiating in Doha, U.S. forces struck Iranian boats and missile launch sites. Israel attacked Hezbollah positions in Lebanon. Iran's envoys reportedly called the U.S. strikes a sign of bad faith. The negotiations and the shooting are happening simultaneously, mediated by Qatar, and nobody in official Washington has explained why active military operations during ceasefire talks are compatible with the idea that peace is close. The midterms are 7 months away. Brent crude is above $100. Consumer sentiment is at 44.8, pandemic levels. Trump needs this war to end. Iran knows it. And Iran has 440 kilograms of uranium that nobody has agreed on how to move. Now let's talk about something that is genuinely new in the world and genuinely alarming. Federal prosecutors in New York charged Michelle Spagnolo, a 36-year-old Google software engineer who lives in Switzerland, with commodities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. Spagnolo, who traded under the account name Alpha Raccoon, allegedly used confidential internal Google data to make $1. 2 million on Polymarket, the crypto-based prediction market platform. According to the criminal complaint, Spagnolo had access to Google's internal year-end search data, the list of the most searched terms and people of 2025, compiled months before its public release. He used that information to bet on prediction market contracts, like, will Squid Game be the #1 search TV show, and correctly called outcomes before the world knew the results. He placed bets. He won. He was wrong only once, on a contract about Zohran Mamdani. This is the second federal case of its kind in 30 days. In April, U.S. Army Special Forces Master Sergeant SSgt Van Dyke was charged for using classified military intelligence about the planned U.S. operation to capture Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to place Polymarket bets days before the operation went public. He spent $33,000. He made $409,000. Van Dyke had operational knowledge of a classified military mission and turned it into a crypto trade on a prediction market, the day the Spagnolo indictment was unsealed. Trump posted on Truth Social that prediction markets should thrive under federal authority, and asserted federal regulators' exclusive jurisdiction over the industry, boxing out state regulators who have been trying to restrict it. The House Oversight Committee, led by Chairman James Comer, launched a formal investigation and demanded that both Polymarket and Kalshi turn over internal records on user verification and trading activity. Here's the problem this story reveals, and it is much larger than two bad actors. Prediction markets are, by design, information arbitrage engines. You bet on what you know. The more accurate and exclusive your information, the better you do. That is the entire model. And in a world where prediction markets have expanded rapidly into political outcomes, military operations, corporate events, and regulatory decisions, the people with the most predictive edge are not retail investors doing research. They are people inside the system. Soldiers with classified mission briefs, engineers with unreleased product data, diplomats with advanced knowledge of policy announcements, analysts with corporate earnings before they're filed. Senator Mark Warner wrote to the CFTC and the Office of Government Ethics in March, a month before the first arrest, warning that prediction market trading by federal employees was creating a new corruption pathway that existing law was not designed to address. His letter cited the Maduro bet and suspicious Polymarket activity around Iran war developments. The agencies did not move quickly enough, and now there are 2 criminal cases and a congressional investigation. Polymarket's chief legal officer said the platform is transparent, traceable, and bad actors leave footprints. That is true. But it also means the platform is a confessional. It logs every bet that couldn't be explained by public information, and prosecutors can work backward to identify the leak. What it does not tell you is how many insider trades were placed and never caught. The 2 arrests represent what investigators found, not what happened. Those are different numbers. Trump wants prediction markets to thrive. Markets want prediction markets to thrive. The person who thinks this is straightforwardly good news is someone who has never asked what happens when every piece of non-public information held by any person in any institution becomes, in effect, a tradable asset. And then there's the thing that requires the least commentary and receives the least attention. London hit 95 degrees Fahrenheit this week, 2 consecutive days, in May. NPR's World Desk noted that temperature records are breaking across Europe, triggering government warnings, and that experts say unpredictable and extreme weather is becoming more frequent. London's average high temperature in May is around 62 degrees Fahrenheit. 95 degrees is not a variance. It is a different climate. The UK government issued health warnings. Emergency services reported heat-related calls. Schools without air conditioning, which is most schools in the UK, because until recently it was not considered necessary, kept students in buildings that were not designed for this. This is not a prediction anymore. The climate models that said European springs would see unprecedented heat events weren't speculative frameworks. They were descriptions of a trajectory that has been unfolding on schedule for 2 decades. The scientists were not early. And what has followed the accuracy of those predictions is not a proportional response. It is not even close to a proportional response. I am not going to tell you the policy solution, because there isn't one that can be implemented in a news cycle. But I will tell you what the gap looks like from a factual standpoint. The International Energy Agency said in 2023 that to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, global emissions needed to peak by 2025 and fall rapidly. Global emissions did not peak in 2025. They hit a record high. The EU's climate target for 2030 requires a 55% reduction in emissions from 1990 levels. Current trajectories put Europe at roughly half that reduction by 2030. Meanwhile, London is 95 degrees in May. The coverage of this story is instructive. It is framed as a weather story, a notable data point in a climate record. And then the news cycle moves on to the next item. The reason this framing persists is not because editors don't understand the severity. It is because sustained coverage of a problem that has no short-term solution does not drive engagement the way breaking news does. There is no villain to arrest, no vote to cover, no deal to announce. There is just a temperature reading that was not supposed to happen for another decade, happening now. That is worth more than a weather report. 3 stories today. A war deal that requires moving 440 kilograms of uranium that nobody has agreed to move, while the fighting continues through the peace talks. A prediction market system that structurally rewards whoever has the most secret information, and just produced its second criminal case in 30 days. And London at 95 degrees in May, a sentence that should not be possible to write. The thread is the same as it has been all week. Things that were predicted have arrived. Things that were warned about have happened, and the gap between knowing and responding hasn't closed. It has widened. At some point, the question stops being "were we warned?" and starts being "what do we actually do about the fact that warnings alone don't work?" Nobody in any of these 3 stories has answered that.